we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Episode of A Conversation With. This week I'm joined by a guest who is the service manager from East Surrey Domestic Abuse Services, which is the outreach service for those survivors that need some support in the community. So when a patient has been identified as a victim of domestic abuse and it's been raised to me as the IDVA, I'll obviously see them in the hospital and I will safety plan and we'll talk about a whole load of stuff, but then what happens next? So this week, that's what we're going to look at. We're just going to have a conversation with the service manager. She's going to tell us about, what happens to our patients when they get referred over to her. So, hello, Louise.
Hello.
It's good to see you in a different context.
I know.
So you are the service manager for ESDAS. And what is ESDAS?
So ESDAS is East Surrey Domestic Abuse Services, and we cover 3 boroughs across the Surrey area. So that's Mole Valley, Tandridge and the Reigate and Banstead areas. And it will be our 30th anniversary next year. So we've been going some time and the kind of service has really expanded since its early grassroots days. So we provide outreach service to adult survivors of age 16 plus and any associated children. And as you say, we get referral streams from all sorts of places. So one of them being yourself. Others may be the police is our largest referral point, but then followed by self-referrals. But our referrals can come from anywhere. So that might be children's social care, family centres, GPs, absolutely anyone that we can take a referral from as long as we have the consent to do so, unless it's a high-risk situation. And we are completely needs-led, so we don't force people to do anything they're not ready to do or don't want to do. Quite often I think, as you'll know, with professionals, they will have an idea of what that client should do or should be doing. We don't work like that, and that's a big part of our advocacy for people that we're working with. And we will go through with that person around our confidentiality remit. So we are a confidential service unless there is a safeguarding concern. And that's made very clear from the outset that we can't always keep information to ourselves if there's a risk, as I'm sure because you're having the same conversations as well. And we work on kind of a strengths-based approach. So we look at what can that person do? What is within their control? How can they regain that empowerment over their lives? And we would work through and we would look at what is it that they want to achieve. Some people come to us who are still very unsure about what they want to do next. So it might be that they're trying to just understand what is happening to me. What is this situation that I'm in? Is this abuse? Is it not abuse? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? And we can kind of talk through all of that with that person and give them resources to kind of go and look at in their own time and at their own pace as well. And it might be someone that is at the point of leaving, through to someone that might be quite historic abuse and they're looking for a more therapeutic intervention, through group work, through counselling, just that emotional support of knowing I'm not alone, and there are other people out there that know what I've been through and can understand. Because I think that's a big part of it, because we know perpetrators work so hard to sabotage support networks, make you feel alone. So having that reconnection is such a big part of what we do.
And so do you know, I know the answer, but the listeners don't know the answer. Do you work with, you know, people that still want to stay in that relationship? Because like you said, as professionals, there will be an expectation that you do X, Y, and Z. So those people that aren't ready, you know, to leave, and you know that that they've consented and they want that support, you know, do you work with people that are still in the relationships? And then how do you get that person from, you know, knowing that there's an issue, knowing that and starting to recognise that the relationship is abusive, to get into that stage of actually we're going to support you leaving?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big misconception out there, is that we only work with people that want to leave or have left, and it's absolutely not true. I would say probably about half the people we work with are still in a situation which they may feel is abusive or unsafe, and we would just work with them to help them unpick what is going on, to understand the behaviour, because when you're in it, it's very confusing, it's very lonely, it's isolating, you don't know who to trust. If I tell you this information, where's it going to go? So we're really helping them understand that at their own pace and at their own need, because people come to us with many different traumas that may not just be from the domestic abuse. You could be from childhood, through whatever else is going on for them. So we would work with them through that to help understand, and to help I guess a big thing is looking at their boundaries. What is acceptable to them, what is not acceptable to them, and really understand that power and control dynamic. And like I say, you take that at that person's own pace. There's no time limit on our support. So it's not that we're only here for 6 weeks or we're only here for 12 weeks, and we've got to solve this problem in that time. It's not how we work. Some people may come to us. We see that in the cycle of abuse where they, you know, spoke to us once a couple of years ago, got some advice, something happens, they then come back, and we don't judge on that. We know how the cycle of abuse works, and we can help our clients understand that as well.
And you know, that's an interesting point, because you know the IDFA role at the hospital is 18 months in, 19 months in, and what I'm starting to see is those patients that are coming back a second or third or a fourth time, and you're making a point of saying hello to them, you know, in a couple of like, oh, it's you again, like, you know, that kind of, but always with a smile on the face, and always they want to talk to you, always, like, you know, and so you know, it sounds like that, you know, if they were to call the outreach service themselves, they would get that same response from you and the rest of the team as well, is that actually this is a safe space. You know, we want this to be as safe as possible for you, in order to kind of help you through whatever's going on right now. So because the role's been in the hospital for like about 19 months, you know, you've had a number of referrals from myself. Now, do you know those numbers off the top of your head, or roughly how many have kind of been picked up from the hospital direct that's come into outreach? That one, how many? And secondly, would you have known about these necessarily if that role wasn't in the hospital? And what is the benefits of having domestic abuse practitioner in the hospital highlighting, you know? Yeah.
I think there are many cases that would have gone completely under our, you know, radar. We would not have noticed without you being there. Particularly, we know where there has been instances of self-harm, of overdose, presenting with suicidal thoughts. We would not have been told about those, because not necessarily someone would have picked up about the domestic abuse or known that they might have been known to our service previously. And they would have been just dealt with as a mental health issue, not that there's been this domestic abuse. So having you there has been crucial in knowing that this person's presented, there are concerns, there is a risk around suicide, and letting us know and letting that outreach worker know. Or if they're not active in service, then we can re-refer them in to give them that holistic support. But around what is causing those suicidal thoughts is the usually living with or the aftermath of domestic abuse. You know, you've probably got a good idea on the numbers that are coming in. It's been a very successful project. I want to say was the report something like 30% increase, something like that. Just shows how much that role is needed in the hospital to support not your clients, but the professionals within that setting in identifying domestic abuse and feeling confident enough to ask that question without feeling like, oh my gosh, if I ask this, am I going to be left with this hot potato, so to speak, you know? And what do I do with that? Because that's not my bag. My bag is medical. Who do I go to? So to have you there kind of on point to go and get advice. But also I think you being there reminds them of us as a service and that they can call in and speak with us or email in, whatever it is going to work to kind of check, actually, I've got these concerns here. Is this person known to you? And quite often we find there is a link, whether it's current or historic.
And you know, it's definitely been successful, like, you know, not necessarily for ESDAS as a charity, but like definitely for those victims that are coming in, like, you know, going, there is somebody here that can talk to you on a genuine level around what you're experiencing, and does have the time to be able to come in and sit with you and safety plan and X, Y, and Z, and, you know, vice versa, as you get the referrals from the hospital. You know, you may have a client that is going to hospital that's a bit scared that they've got some trauma, and you're able to kind of ring us up and kind of, you know, say, hey, my client's coming in, she's either been assaulted, can you just go and make sure she's okay? And it kind of just makes it a much smoother transition because of that fight, freeze mode that's going on.
And hospitals are scary places. You know, they're noisy, they're loud, there's hustle and bustle everywhere, which, like you say, when you're in that fight flight place, it's just complete bedlam. And it's like, I don't want to talk, you completely can shut down, and you get those victims that freeze, those that go into fight and become quite aggressive, whereas we can look at that in a very different lens, I think. So to have you there to actually go, right, okay, let's ground this person, let's get them, connect to those senses, get them in a place to talk, rather than coming at them with consequences and kind of, I guess, a more punitive approach, which I think traditionally you see in many settings, not just particularly hospitals, but through, I'd say, police, through children's services, where it's kind of, there's consequences to that trauma-based behaviour.
And the referrals that you've received from the hospital, so from myself, you know, that have come into outreach, because what we know is that we typically, you know, somebody that's coming into the hospital is at the highest point of crisis. They're either very sick or something has happened in order for them to come into the hospital. So, you know, sometimes, you know, the adrenaline's all over the place, and, you know, as people do, is that they can disclose a lot of information because of, you know, what's happening at the time, but then can backtrack, you know, and almost regret having that conversation. But by that point, you would have picked up the referral. You know, so what, if you know, what is that ratio of those that go, no, thank you, you know, thank you for the phone call, you know, I'm happy at the moment, I know that where you are, to those that go, do you know what, actually, yes, I'm gonna run with this, I'm gonna do this support, like, do you know those kind of percentages?
I mean, it really does vary. I think throughout the project we've seen different peaks in numbers, haven't we, which has been quite interesting. I think a lot of that has depended on kind of awareness, I think, within the media and the public around domestic abuse, and those numbers that have come through have definitely correlated. In terms of what then goes on to be supported by outreach, again, really changes. I would say probably about 10% maybe then go on to say, actually, yes, I want longer term support, which, you know, I'm not surprised by, because like you say, they're coming in crisis, it blurts out, and then there's a sudden realisation of, oh, I've said it out loud. What does that mean to me? I've acknowledged that there is abuse, and it's rubbish, isn't it? You know, to have that picked up, have professionals in your life, which can feel really uncomfortable. You know, you just want them to go away, particularly as it's been installed, and you probably through the perp, that agencies are unsafe. You know, they can't be trusted. They're going to take your kids away. They're going to do this. All those things that aren't true that we can work with to unpick, but what we do tend to see is that maybe there'll be another presentation at the hospital, and then it'll be, actually, no, like, I want to make a change now. Now I'm ready. And that's what we're saying, is we're not we're not doing it at our speed, it's about you, and we walk with you on that journey.
And I get, like, you know, and that's the perfect place to end, actually, like, is that, you know, it's reassuring to know that actually that there is that support, that pick-up support, you know, for those patients that do kind of acknowledge, actually, I'm in a really crappy place, like what's happening to me is really horrible, you know, and I don't want this to happen anymore. And then somebody in the community can pick that up and advocate for them and be their voice sometimes, you know, where they don't feel that they have a voice. And it's almost, you know, the analogy I've got in my head is like, you know, that child, you're teaching a child to speak again and acknowledging, you know, that they matter and their voice matters.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good, and it's like the one with a baby learning to walk, isn't it? Like when that baby learns to walk, you know, you don't point and laugh when the baby falls down, you know, you offer that encouragement, which is what we do. And it is completely at that person's speed and pace, and we'll meet them wherever they are, you know, where they're at. So I think what I would say to people listening is, if you don't know about your local service, is to go and get acquainted with it. You know, for survivors, have a look at a website if you can do that safely around, you know, clearing history, or use a different device to kind of find out. For professionals, get acquainted with us or your local service, you know, come and find out, so you feel confident in having a chat with someone and saying, actually, I can refer you here and this is what they can offer, because it'll be different wherever you're based.
Thank you so much, Louise, for joining me this week with the conversation with. To those listeners, like, I hope that you have found some reassurance that actually there is support for yourself if you're experiencing any form of domestic abuse, but knowing that if you've helped a patient that has disclosed domestic abuse, that there is going to be follow through with that, and that they are going to be supported for as long as that patient wants that to happen. So join me again next week, where we will be looking at a different subject and speaking to a different person. Thank you. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time.